For those of you who see this remotely and are joining now, I have two intentions. And wherever possible, I'm going to try and avoid the bright, shiny object syndrome, which is very easy in this game of AI and particularly alluring for someone like me who just gets amazed by all of the things that are going on in the world of AI and how it's changing a lot. My intention, as per the picture, above me here, is to position the coming wave and the way in which it's shaping up to be a very different education world in the coming 5 years. Could be less, it could be more, but there are some signs and indications, and I've got some videos to play for you along the way as well. So that first intention is to position what we're facing in education and how it's probably, in my view, and in what I'm hearing and seeing, the most significant change that we'll be facing. And the second thing is to be more practical around what are the strategic and tactical steps that schools can take. And I'm going to present this as a series of swim lanes that sort of show the areas of attention that leadership in the school need to be addressing as we move forward into this space. Welcome, Kathy. If you get a chance, just give us a chance to let me. Okay. Thanks, Judith. I'm wondering if I've met you at FIS, but yeah, Fukuoka. I was there last September in Japan. Welcome, Kathy. If you get a chance to jump in and say where you are dialing in from, that would be lovely as well. And just to very quickly reframe two intentions here. One is to position what we're facing and the scope and the depth of that particular situation, and then some practical steps. I usually like to start with something that positions things a little bit, and this is actually not a quote, but as AI redefines education, today's leaders must navigate an unprecedented transformation. And clearly I've had ChatGPT search for appropriate quotes, given some frames of reference, and this is an interesting one. It's a synthesis of a range of things said at the recent Graduate School of Education's Harvard's Graduate School of Education, this forum, World Economic Forum on AI's impact on education. I'm going to accept that as a quote per se, because it captures the intent and the process that we are actually following and seeing at the moment. I'm going to position something here, first of all, from the boss of NVIDIA, which is still the third largest organization and company in the world as per market capitalization, still a bit behind Apple, but closing in on Apple and soon to be probably the next level of the second most large company in the world. And NVIDIA, if you're not sure, actually creates a lot of the GPUs, the chips, the mechanisms, the processes, and even some of the apps that are building our AI world. This is the CEO. And I'm going to let it run for a couple of minutes because there are some provocations in here that I'd love you to get a hold of. Michael, if you let me know that just give me a thumbs up if the sound is coming.
Almost everybody knows how to break down a problem and assemble teams. Every company, I believe, in the future will have a large collection of NIMs, and you would bring down the experts that you want. You connect them into a team, and you don't even have to figure out exactly how to connect them. You just give the mission to an agent.
So to quickly pause there, his own company builds these things called NIMS, NIMS. Don't worry about so much, but they are agents that can do work for us in an AI setting, and they are AI engineered and are generative. So let's continue now.
To a NIM to figure out who to break the tasks down and who to give it to. And that central, the leader of the application, if you will, the leader of the team would break down the task and give it to the various team members. The team members would perform their task, bring it back to the team leader. The team leader would reason about that and present an information back to you. Just like humans. This is in our near future. this is the way applications are going to look. Now, of course, we could interact with.
Just pausing that point. Up until this point, applications have been deterministic. They've been programmed, they've been structured to solve a particular problem through a user interface often, and it has been hard-coded. This world is generative that's being suggested here. In other words, the system that's being pulled together with a series of agents that are not necessarily predetermined in the way that they're going to interact and managed by a lead agent are very human-like in the way that they create. So applications that we are building from this point onwards will be generative rather than being deterministic. So that's one big change that's coming.
These AI services with text prompts and speech prompts. However, there are many applications where we would like to interact with what is otherwise a human-like form. We call them digital humans. NVIDIA has been working on digital human technology for some time. Let me show it to you. Digital humans has the potential of being a great interactive agent with you. They make much more engaging. They could be much more empathetic. And of course, we have to cross this incredible chasm, this uncanny chasm of realism, so that the digital humans would appear much more natural.
Did you know that NVIDIA?
So we'll pause there. So two key ideas. One, that we are moving from deterministic to generative in the way that we interact with technology, the way that technology supports us. And the second, this quest to humanize and put a human type experience and face onto some of these AI agents. And in fact, that's the sort of theme that I want to bring here. This is the big shift that we've got in front of us. The scope and the depth and the extent to which we have a generative world is not yet fully realized. We're just in the early days of this. But this means that the vision of these agents that are pulled together to act in a particular way to solve a particular problem does not even need coding experience. These modular agents can be enlisted by a lead agent, and they're given the mission to complete, and the lead agent does all sorts of interesting things, including co-opting and bringing on board part of the team that's required, agents, not humans, and then to generate the results from that team and assess those results and ask the question, is this what we're needing, and go back and regenerate as we need. So this is an entirely new world that will have some big impacts on what we do as a school. And the second idea is that we're moving to these very human-like engagements that will get more and more tricky to discern whether they're actually human or AI, and that's a separate issue. So to give this a sort of a point of reference, many of us, I would imagine, without wanting to date those of you that are with us at the moment, certainly me, I still remember the days of dial-up internet. And this is actually a 56K modem illustrated, but my first modem was a 28.8K. And you imagine the world that was beginning to be opened up by the internet. We're talking back in the 90s now. We're talking approaching over 30 years and into approaching 40 years of the internet having an impact. And I've just taken on a contract with my provider of services to get a 5 gigabits a second optic. Now I've got 1 gigabit at the moment here in Singapore. We are the land of the internet in lots of ways. But the reference I'm drawing is that we are like the days, in terms of AI, we are at the beginning of this, and the equivalent metaphor or analogous approach here is that, like, we're using a 28.8K modem at the moment, and the world in front of us in the next 2, 5, 10, 15 years is largely unknown and very difficult to imagine. And coming back to that quote at the beginning, this is going to be a massive redefinition of what schools look like, what schools do, not so much maybe the bricks and mortar of schools, but the way that we deliver and what we deliver and how we deliver stuff. And that's what I intend to go through as we go forward. Please add, hi Ollie, great that you can join. Please add questions into the chat if you've got challenges or questions to explore further on. And as typically with me, there are too many slides for me to deliver, and I might jump through some of these as we go forward. Part of this provocation I'm building is that we are up for a significant shift in what our workforce looks like and what they're doing. And the Future of Jobs report from last year, which I think is a bit conservative, is suggesting by 2027 that there's a 23% change of jobs. And there are some numbers that don't quite add up here, but 69 new, or I would imagine enhanced jobs, and those that are going to disappear, 83 million eliminated. And the question is, what will they be, and how will that play out in the world of education? It's worthwhile getting a hold of this report. I'm not going to spend any time on this one, but it started to show the shift in the skills that are required for our children. So you can see there the sorts of top 10 skills that we need. And if you measure that against what we typically are delivering still in education, with a system that's framed around curriculum and timetable, a system that's arguably over 200 years old, we are still delivering in the same mechanistic manner with not hugely updated broadly curriculum delivery and outcome intent. You can see that we haven't yet, as a system of education, adapted, I think, to what the world is really needing. But that's something I offer to you, that for you to get stuck into and engage with. So we've got some wicked problems in education that I think we are finally approaching being able to be supported by education. And I'm going to speak through some of these, but each of these are a talking point in their own right. And I'm likely to be developing other sessions, other courses as a part of my work with EduSpark. And that way we can start to approach this in a multi-pronged manner. Teacher workload has yet to be solved by the industry. We still have a situation where teachers are expected to continue work, and what that looks like is arguable. But that work often goes into the evening and into weekend hours and is unpaid. And not many other industries do that. And it's a part of the expectation of a teacher that you'll be marking on a Sunday afternoon, or as I often see here in Singapore, people on a Saturday evening going to a cafe and just going through their marking. And I see that very often. And of course, the teacher development piece fits into that. That was why I said arguable what those elements are. Teacher development sits outside of the scope largely of delivery of curriculum and timetable. So teachers often do their professional learning alone outside of school hours, or away from geographically where the school is, in a workshop, a weekend workshop, or a weekend conference, or an asynchronous online course. So those two things stifle educational innovation. Education is very slow, and in fact hasn't really scaled any significant innovation that's worthy, that tends to go across systems. We're slow to adapt to the influence of technology. It's taken us years to adapt and adopt devices as the most recent wave of technology. And this whole idea of personalizable learning, not personalized, calling out Yong Tsao, one of the great provocateurs in education. And he, in an interview I gave with him, or he gave with me rather, talked about the difference between personalized learning and personalizable learning. And here we are at the brink of a world of personalizable learning, both in professional learning and for students. So we're going to cover some of what that might look like coming up. So these are the wicked problems that we haven't solved largely for quite some time. And I think we are in the scope, the radar scope is showing some potential solutions for each of these. And you'll see how I'm going to play into this. I've got some questions that I want you to take away from this as an opportunity. What is the highest value work of a teacher? I often ask teachers, and I ask principals and heads and people within schools, what value do you bring to the classroom? What value do you bring to your team as a middle leader? What value do you bring to your school? Sometimes I get an answer that I help people in my team get through the administrative needs of the school and my team, and which is inclusive of getting through the curriculum. Sometimes teachers will say the value I bring, less so these days, but still to a degree, teachers will say it's the body of knowledge that's in my head and the craft of knowing how to deliver that in a classroom setting. So the craft of knowledge-based pedagogy is what people would see as their skill set. And that still lives through often the secondary curriculum approach, where I'm defined by the subject that I teach. I'm a physics teacher, I'm a maths teacher. And that's been shaping the narrative we have about the values we have as a teacher. I think that particular picture is at large risk. And I'll answer that one with the last question there. What are the lower value, the bolded ER, is not to say low value, but the lower value tasks that AI can contribute to, which is where the reducing workload issue starts to belong. And as I'm going to suggest, I think the curriculum as we know it is the first thing that is under threat by AI, and there are reasons why I'm saying that. If we reduce the need to deliver content, information, knowledge, then what does a future classroom look like? What is the shift in the role of the teacher that we've been talking about for the last generation in many, many ways? The shift from, to quote a cliche, the sage on the stage versus the guide on the side. We've been talking about that, but the delivery need of the curriculum has been preventing us really stepping into that as being the major role that we have to a large extent. And the big question, will AI replace teachers? And the most immediate answer that many people will say, no, cannot. How can an AI replace a teacher? And I think that's a depends type question. I think the teachers that are more at risk of being replaced by AI are the teachers who stay in the older paradigm of content expertise and a pedagogical skill set which is built around delivery of content in classroom settings. These are the teachers, I'm not saying they will be, but these are the teachers I think that will be at greatest risk. I'm going to position in this what teachers won't be replaced and how we can actually use this to increase the value of a teacher for students, and actually as seen by our community. Our communities broadly still don't value teachers in the way that they should, and this is one of those reasons and one of those mechanisms. So this is one of my famous 2x2s. People know that I'm a bit of a geek for 2x2s. And this positions lower versus higher, lower value activities and tasks versus higher value work, and what might be replaced by AI and what is irreplaceable. And I'll just deal with the bottom right-hand corner, things like mowing the lawn, and that's not a good example, but getting a haircut, the stuff that's routinely human that has no value to be replaced by AI broadly, brushing your teeth, that's just a silly example, but I don't want to touch that bottom right one. AI tasks are where we might start to reduce teacher workload in the world of this first wave, if you like, of understanding and getting to grips with what AI can do for me as a teacher. And these are the things that, if you start to scope out all of the work that a teacher does, report writing is something that gets mentioned a lot in the workshops I do. The regular administrative task type content that takes a lot of time and doesn't give a lot of impact, not as much as the higher value stuff. So assessing workload and workflows in terms of where can AI play a part in reducing that workload by taking over part of that workflow. I'm going to leave scaling for a moment here, and I spoke about that in the prompting webinar. Michael, you're going to get some of that again with apologies. But the meta skills is, I think, in the realm of very, very, very hard to replace. And the reason I think that you will find the sort of example I showed before, where we might get a human-like digital assistant, and I'm going to show some live examples in a second, That's the scaling side of things. The meta skills, I believe, that are beyond for the foreseeable future, who knows how long that will be, are the things that come from the value of being the presence of an outstanding teacher. And outstanding teachers, according to the research of two people that I'm referencing here, Zach Stein and John Corrigan, unfortunately and sadly, a good friend of mine who is the late John Corrigan, and I can reference any work here that you'd like to see, but 4 things that outstanding teachers deliver. They get through the curriculum as it is at the moment. They get stuff done, and they care for students, and that care is palpable and experienced by students. That's what most really good teachers do. But the difference between the best teachers and a really solid teacher is that the best teachers knowably and deliberately, intentionally create active open-mindedness in students, largely because of the way that these teachers show up and how they model that. And then secondly, they are experts at creating insight in the minds of students. And insight is actually the mechanism of learning. And when students have insight, and that insight is crafted and what's the word I'm looking for, emphasized in a way that makes that insight stronger, then these are the people who create lots of learning in kids. And understanding what insight does and how it can be created is a part of the intentional craft of these most outstanding teachers. So there are some things at this high level meta skills: the modeling of curiosity, the modeling of vulnerability, the modeling of empathy. These are all things you cannot teach. You can teach what curiosity is, what empathy is, but you can't teach it. It's learnt, but not taught, if that makes sense. Teaching a child what empathy is doesn't make that child empathetic. So these are the meta skills that I think will remain beyond the realm. And as we reduce the work pressure, the workload pressure, we release teachers to move more into these meta skills. And one of the things that teachers can get more time to do in this sort of world is professional learning that helps them understand how to move into these higher order meta skills that the most outstanding teachers do. A curious thing, just watching the time, that happens in education, Michael, you might be an example of this. People who are outstanding teachers are not necessarily always modeled by teachers within a school. They're not identified as an exemplar, and people don't say, what is it that Michael is doing that is causing him to be such an outstanding teacher? Some of these skill sets are transparent or invisible to many teachers. And because they're not visible, they can't identify what it is that makes Michael such an outstanding teacher. And the way that shows up in schools is that's just what Michael does. That's just Michael. That's his thing. He does that. And it doesn't become a mechanism of scalability. So that's one of the curious things. Many curiosities that live in education. We're currently an organised group of schools that are teaching organisations rather than learning organisations. And I know we've got exceptions to that, but that's what curriculum and timetable forces on us. So what I want to talk about is the 2 left-hand side quadrants and the top right-hand one, and how do we use AI to scale that? And I might jump ahead. No, I'm not. I'm going to go into this next slide. And this is a concept of, I'm going to reference in the follow-up 2 YouTube videos that are worth watching. And this one has come from a YouTube video, and I'm very good at forgetting names, but one of the current leads of Singularity, Singularity University. His first name is Salim, and he is also someone who used to be one of the VPs in the old days of Yahoo. And he's quite a commentator on many things. And this video positions the next 5 years of disruption that we're facing. And his observation of education is that we've been in a push setting for too long. We've been pushing the curriculum and timetable type approach with system-determined content. We decide what it is that kids need. We have structures of delivery, including the way that we organise our schools, organise our classrooms, organised by age-based convenience of delivery. exams that test the knowledge acquisition largely. I know that there have been trends away from that. And age-related, as I suggested, grouping and framing. And that push system is what we've been and still are in the middle of. I think where we're moving to is a pull-based system. And I want to describe what this might look like in a classroom. So PBL, or problem-based learning, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, are the sort of the vanguard of a move away from more instructionally focused, content-focused curricula. I'm not going to mention it, but certainly IB is one mechanism that's in play, which is not a curriculum, I know, but it's moving towards this pull-based environment. But it's learner-determined content. It's less structured. It's just in time and context-driven, and opens up the possibility for AI tutors or teachers with human teachers bringing the highest value work that I described before. So I'm going to try and build a bit of a story here. Reflective practice is an example. Yep, Michael, this is absolutely reflective learner practice as well as reflective teacher practice. So a classroom that looks like this might be a group of students who have similar abilities, and there are arguments about how you might group, but maybe not necessarily just age-structured groups. And there's a problem that group or a project that small groups of students within a classroom, a little bit like the Year 5 IB end of completion program, and I forget the name of that one at the moment. This is my end of day brain, but exhibition. Thank you. So, thank you, my own brain. Exhibition is an example of a project-based or a problem-based approach where we might be looking at a unit of inquiry that goes for a whole term. It involves small groups of children, and they might be looking at large, even wicked problems such as world poverty, the whole idea of plastics and pollution. And as a group of 3 or 4 students, you might need someone to mentor and connect with that student group to help shape their query. And they might come back to the agent, the AI agent, and say, we're stuck on this problem. How can you help us move forward? So we're playing the scaling game here. This could be a real teacher in the classroom or an AI agent. And we are stuck on some concepts, some knowledge-based concepts that we need help with. And we want that AI agent to teach us these concepts before we move forward. So what gets taught on top of some very basic things like literacy, numeracy, and technology literacy, even AI literacy, a lot of the other things that are needed at the time are pulled down by the student at that particular time. The teacher, the role of the teacher in that situation is very much more a mentor, a project manager, a coach, and maybe sometimes directive towards what you might need to learn next. So it's this superversion of an AI agent that is coordinating the whole group and facilitating generative discussion amongst students in a way that AI can't quite do at the moment. So that sort of classroom, that could be a whole afternoon of work. The morning is building the foundational literacies that we need. And then the afternoon then becomes much more explorative, inquiry-based, using a mix of AI agents and the presence of a teacher who provides that absolute meta highest value work. To illustrate how that might work in terms of an AI tutor, this is very...
My name is Sal Khan. I'm the founder of Khan Academy. And I'm also the author of a new book about artificial intelligence in education called Brave New Words. And OpenAI invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, make sure it can see our screen.
Actually, in this form.
Hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together.
couple of things I want you to notice. Access to the intelligence of the system through natural languaging, how the AI is responding in a way that might give the felt experience that I'm speaking with a human. So you might have noticed some of the inflection and some of the emotional language. And while this is not a visual chatbot, this is an auditory one, how this might be a move ahead of what we might have been seeing already in the world of AI, which is all text-based.
Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right. So I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay. I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done. Now that you've identified the hypotenuse, can you identify which side is the opposite side to angle alpha?
Okay, well, I mean, you told me earlier that this was the adjacent side, and I know that's the hypotenuse. So I'm guessing that this side, BC, is the opposite side.
Great deduction. That's absolutely correct. Now that you've identified all the sides relative to angle alpha, do you remember the formula for finding the sine of an angle in a right triangle?
Yeah, I know that.
We might leave that here. And it's a little bit over the top still for me. And so while it's a bit, I don't know how real and how much stage this particular one is, but the points I want you to bring from this, yes, the AI bot is responding in a way that might be exaggerated encouragement, for example, but the way that it's able to be interrupted, the way that the conversation now is much more natural sounding, and the way that the latency, and this is what the technology growth is doing in terms of all of the underlying servers, GPUs, mechanisms that are in play here, this is now a believably socially organized conversation with interruptibility, social inflection, and fast response. Prior to this, there would be a bit of a wait, and that wait then the prompt of the voice would come back and offer the answer. And that interruptibility, human-like inflection in voice, even to some degree, you'll hear some like I'm doing now, a little bit of stuttering, a little bit of a production mistake in delivery. These sorts of things are making the instance super real. So underneath this sort of chatbot lies a breadth of content-based knowledge and context. And there's one other thing that's going on here, that the agent can hear and see, literally see what the boy is doing in terms of what's going on the iPad. So this is current and available now. It's not much of a step at all to move into the realm where this is a primary delivery mechanism of someone who might be teaching these concepts in math or maths. So if it's present now, this is illustrative of that scaling conversion or scaling incursion, if you like, of AI into lower aspects of direct teaching. So besides the workload issue, we're starting to get to the idea of personalization for a student, and Khan Academy is all over this, and their Khan Amigo is being set up to do this, so that you have a personalized generative response that is different to this particular boy compared to other students that might be asking the ChatGPT similar things. This is the worst you're ever going to see this sort of instance be. It's only going to get better and stronger. So yeah, Brave New Worlds. But it's certainly, we are in the realm of some of these Brave New World aspects. Ironically, Michael, Brave New World was the inspiration for the ad for Macintosh arriving in the marketplace when IBM was then the dominant personal computer creator in the world. And that ad, which was in the first year of my teaching, giving away, was inspired by both 1984 and Brave New World. So a little bit of an aside there. So that's one thing we've got going at the moment. Who needs a generative digital human-looking assistant when someone can respond by voice like that, and we're already there? So in many ways, this is looking at a slightly different way of, instead of dealing in information and content, and this is often in the professional development side as well, we're moving beyond now, I think, the whole idea of implementation, the second stage, the how stage, into an intelligent approach. So the intelligence of knowing the individual needs of a particular child, the intelligence to bind these together into a bit of an ecosystem, so that for every child like this who's interacting with a school-sponsored, school-organized, school-available system of tutor-type bots, then what this is doing in the back end is providing massive amounts of engagement data, performance data, and starting to give schools an intelligence-like approach, an intelligent approach to understanding what's happening in each classroom and what the kids are absolutely needing. And so instead of a system that's based on the score on an exam and how well a teacher's KPIs are on in terms of delivering a score and set of scores in a set of exams, then we're now starting to build knowledge of the impact of a teacher in a classroom through the agency of AI engagements that are systematically produced in a similar way to we described that very first video from the founder and CEO of NVIDIA. And so these are very, very fast developments that are occurring, where rather than the toe in the water, let's learn how to prompt, let's use schoolai.com or let's use Perplexity. These are very early stages, 28.8K equivalent modem type performance. And we are yet to move into the world of high-speed broadband that I'm mentioning as the analogy before. So I've shown this before.
您好，欢迎来到教师掌握人工智能。坦白说，这是按德吕的数字孪生。我正在与 Jennifer.
So I don't want to talk much more about that. For those of you who may not have seen that before, this is HeyGen. And if you combine the previous example with an AI agent that is well versed on a curriculum, so that agent that was demonstrated before might be the maths teacher, the digital maths teacher, and available to a bunch of schools would be a range of digital tutors in different curriculum areas, which would enable a student to engage in the right way and for the agent to be intelligent enough to say, sounds like you actually need a physics teacher at this point, not so much do you mind if I pass you to my colleague, ... And this intelligent grouping of AI agents that work together as a system, which is largely responsible for the delivery of the curriculum per se. I'm not saying that will happen, but that's a vision of what could be happening. And if that's the case, what transition is needed at the school leadership level to keep up with that as a development? Because that could be a market pressure where schools will start to offer themselves. Khan Academy could offer themselves as a curriculum alternative to a bunch of teachers in schools with their large-scale body of knowledge already, easy way of training these GPTs on established knowledge bases in curriculum areas. And then we've got this situation where that scaling piece, where we scale the curriculum and content delivery piece, is then an available option for schools. We maybe aren't too far away from this. you can imagine this. I didn't explain this. This is HeyGen. This is my digital avatar speaking in a different language. All this was me training HeyGen for a couple of minutes, using that video as a mechanism to train it on me. You can see I'm using the same background as I am now, probably the same shirt. And that's a realistic looking avatar of me. And so individual experts, people like Michael, I mentioned this last time, Michael, on the call that you're on, Michael could set up a scaled set of versions of himself as key mechanisms of delivery, so that there's that deeper personalized connection between the students he has in his classroom and the familiarity that these students have with his digital twin in the way that they might need access to his broad body of structured content-based knowledge. Your boarding duty starts in 5 minutes. Thanks very much, Agatha. I'll follow up and give you access to the remaining pieces. So that is a bit of a glimpse into a potential picture of a coming world where we've got this move from general delivery. Asynchronous video and professional learning is a great example of this. And then we move into on-demand, AI-delivered content and implementation, information and implementation expertise, and then the high-level intelligence and nuanced understanding of how to apply that in a particular situation is the realm of the human expert. And so we're moving from general to personalized, and we're moving from disaggregated, and schools are the very home of disaggregation with lots of different systems. Classrooms are disaggregated in terms of visibility of learning data outcomes, metrics that we might not be able to measure now, or we can't measure in a way that's cohesive across the whole school. We are moving in this direction, again, bottom left to top right. It's my favorite move, obviously, from AI replacing AI lower value work to release us to do higher value work, and from disaggregated general to personalized and integrated. What I want to do is position now the swim lanes that probably need to be in place to start to enable school leadership to structure the foundation at several levels in a school, and how it might need to start to position itself so that it can take advantage of these changes that are coming. This is by no means complete. It's been a growing swim lane list that I've got that we're now offering up as a tool, that being EduSpark, that enables schools to do an analysis of their current position and give a bit of a strategic outline of where school leadership should be paying its attention. And right now, probably people's attention is sitting right in the area of capability and capacity building, particularly with staff. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is front end. How do you use ChatGPT to do these things, as an example? So the prompting game is a part of that purple swim lane. So without reading all of those, you can see that there are some key areas, and probably the biggest one is the orange one, this leading the game of adoption and adaptation. And I'm going to speak to that one and the policies piece now, and probably leave the time for further investigation of some of these, or further interrogation, challenge even, of some of my thinking. I'd frame everything I've said so far with, this is not always necessarily the way the world is going to go. I'm an active listener to narrative in a variety of different forms, not just education. And it's listening to a load of these sorts of podcasts and YouTube videos that is enabling the growing picture that I can see. And that's the caveat to all of this. Who knows how things are going to work out. So in terms of broad AI capabilities from a school point of view, from a leadership point of view, these are some of the ones that I'm seeing that we need to develop and have in place for a school to be able to be foundationally responsive to the demand of AI in the world. I think a lighthouse statement positions to a community, this is our position on AI. This is how we intend to learn and build the journey ahead with our school community and particularly our students. And our approach is ... I'm involved in some forums in the US, and by and large, the Lighthouse statement tends to be not formal and not public, and we're not going to use AI at our school. Thanks very much. So that's a common and maybe unhelpful position to take as a school leader, because teachers and students will be using AI in spite of leadership saying, we're not going to be using it here. Thanks very much, folks. And already we're in a situation where kids are ahead of the game to some degree. I'll talk briefly about academic integrity in a moment. This alignment piece, who are we as a school historically? What are our values and mission? And what's our strategic goal set so that we can align the pressure and demand to adapt to coming AI technologies in relation to mission, vision, and strategic goals? That's a body of work. All of these take time and effort. The whole idea of making sure we remain strong on security and on privacy, having a structured development plan. At the moment, that structure is not yet appearing for schools, and rightly so, because we're still exploring what the key skill sets are in operational terms, which is largely around prompting efficiency, and pedagogical design, so that we can start to use the affordance of AI in a classroom. The presence of a reference group, not just a single person, but a PLN. A lot of the schools I'm working with have a reference group, if you like, an advisory committee on AI, so that leadership does not need to become the expert on AI and what platforms and how to use them in terms of the opportunities that are present, so that this reference group can speak to the current state of teacher and student experience that's available to that. So that's something that I think needs to be technically organised as soon as possible. Some schools I work with have a single person at that point. That probably needs to expand into a group of interested people who are at the pointy end of the diffusion of innovation model, who themselves are early adopters and who can start to explore the stress points, the opportunities, and the difficulties that AI is going to present. Formalized roles where someone has, as a part of their leadership portfolio, maybe an assistant principal, has a component of their time for leading and coordinating all of this. I can see this becoming an identifiable singular role where AI adoption integration becomes an assistant principal role. I don't see it yet in the market, but I think there is so much work to be done that we are just starting to understand that we haven't really got to that point. And then how do we bake this into professional learning requirements? I hesitate with the word KPIs, but you get an idea of what are our expectations of teachers in our school in terms of what we want them to do with AI. Now, the diffusion of innovation model, I've used it many times before, too much to talk about today, but that would say we've got a group of laggards in any change management process that's around technology. And these people are the ones who are most at risk of being replaced. The more we can actually identify and know what our highest value work is, the more we can actually approach making sure we are in that delivery of highest value work most of the time. And these are the ones who will be inoculated against the whole sense of the AI threat coming to get our jobs. The ones who are least inoculated are the ones who will hide in the cupboard. So that's one example. By the way, on that, one of these webinars, and I haven't referenced it today, but often we get an immune response talking about inoculation. And that immune response comes from those who fear losing the way life has always been. And sometimes with new technologies, sometimes it's not technology-based, we get a very strong immune response from the threat of the new technology. And that position that I described before, that I'm hearing most of all in the US, hearing about most of all from the US context, is that this is too much for us just going to ban it like some universities do. We're just going to put a bag on our head in the sand, whatever, and we are going to do what we can to prevent this from arriving. That's as useful as saying the internet's a bad thing. Let's stop using the internet. We know that the cat is out of the bag with the internet. It is already out of the bag with AI. So be watchful of those immune responses. So some of these other ones, back to this, become fairly obvious. Embedding, there's a consultancy bit of work around the pink one, appropriate embedding into teaching and learning workflows. That's discovery as we move forward, and as a group of people, how we know how to best use our existing knowledge of pedagogy to make the most of the affordance of AI. Engaging the school community is a relatively easier piece compared to everything else, but that is inclusive of student voice in the development of AI, just calling that one out. And let's not forget the non-teaching staff and how we can use AI across that. But I'm going to come into directly this space of the whole policy and guidance provision. Some people are a little bit anti-policy, more from the point of view that the world of AI is changing so rapidly, the policies will be out of date very quickly. So maybe it's a framework, maybe it's a guidance document, maybe it is a policy. And there are some new, and there will be existing policies that need to be updated and developed, as well as the new ones being developed. And so a couple of examples, and I've got a bigger list coming up, which you can grab in the PDF for this deck. So one way going forward is, you might say to a group of staff, for the next year, this is a staff in our school, we have made the commitment to stay with these 3 platforms. We're not going to go into a disaggregated world where maths is using this particular platform. Our INS staff are using a different platform. That whole disaggregated technology picture across a school, there seems to be some willingness to say, we're going to stick with these platforms. If you want to add a new one, there's a process for applying to make sure that it's considered as a new tool for us to use. And that means you aggregate the demands for teaching people how to use platforms, and it means that students get a consistent approach to platforms that they can predictably use across different subject areas. That's an example of a policy that might be a new one. The allowed, not allowed type guidance for instance, DP work. And IB will give their own guidance on this if they haven't already. What are we not going to allow any use of AI in assessment tasks at DP? And what are we going to allow a co-pilot collaboration between students and AI in the delivery and the development of outcomes and tasks for assessment? So that's something for schools to make sense of, and that's something that is still not yet firm for most schools, but that needs to be a statement in place so that the school is protected in its assessment policy, particularly in relation to working with IB and other frameworks and curricula. Academic integrity is a massive new policy that's required. And if I get a few minutes, I might show you how we can do some of this workload and deal with. Here are just a few policies that often exist in schools that might have the need to be updated in the light of AI. And I'm not going to read them all out. You can scan through and quickly see them, and you can start to see this is probably one of the big foundational pieces to do. And some of these won't be able to be done until a school has some broad intelligence and understanding of what AI is capable of, what it could be doing. And even then, this is probably going to require an agile approach. I think AI might come to the rescue here. And I think, if not already, it's built as an opportunity, offering schools an AI agent that you can load existing policies into and have AI help develop, not without humanized oversight, but AI develop these and tune them for a world of AI. Another one here, these are probably new ones. How do we govern the AI development, the procurement, which platforms do we use? You can see all of these. Some of these might be new, older ones that need to be updated. Some might be completely new. And so I'm not suggesting all of these need to be done, but there are probably going to be 3 or 4 immediate policies that schools need to craft and do so quickly to provide clarity to the school body, parents, students, and teachers about making sense of the world that's in front of us and the new things that are available to us, and whether we accept some of those new things or not. I feel like I've been in super delivery mode again, and I'm watching for any comments or questions. I think I might leave it there with that, other than to say, let me check through these other areas that I've got. That's the non-teaching one. The school community I want to mention, some schools are not including student voice in this whole area of development. And I'll see some schools doing so because they've got that in place already. And it's a really powerful thing in this, probably the biggest transition we're going to face in lots of ways, to actually have the students in on and with together, particularly around academic integrity, discussing lines in the sand with what we'll accept and what we won't accept, in what nuance and what context may they change. Pardon me, that's a hugely important area of development. So with that, I'm not even going to demonstrate. I've got a demonstration of a ChatGPT instance where I've uploaded the IB academic integrity piece, and I've asked ChatGPT to do an assessment of that in terms of robustness against AI and the sorts of new things AI will build, and suggestions for development as a concept. And it's something that I'd offer in terms of that massive body of work of starting to look at, and some of the training I'll be building will be around this whole idea of how can we get AI to do some of that heavy lifting of that massive body of work of adjusting policies to make sure we're protected and have clarity around the way to move this and go forward. With that, this is the new updated school readiness tool that is inclusive of that new policy piece. So I'm going to make this available, and we've now got our workflow. The previous workflow we had about the earlier iteration of this wasn't completing for us. And my new PA, Dewi, and I are working to generate reports for people based on this tool, which takes about 10 or 15 minutes to complete and gives a sense of those academic swim lanes, the school-based swim lanes for development as we go forward. That's right at the top of the hour. That's the past course that I did where Michael was involved in the prompting piece, which is very early. And I think we'll look back on prompting in the future and think, do you remember the times when we used to have to prompt a GPT? As a final provocation, we're about to enter a world where we all have a personal and personalized agent that follows us throughout our digital presence. Every teacher, every child, every parent, every CEO will have one of these personalized agents. Look at the narrative coming out of Microsoft at the moment. You'll see that that will be something we will just have, our own personal digital assistant. What does a world look like when that's the case, particularly in education? So thank you for being present. Happy to stay and jump on and jam. If you need to go, please go.